by saying, when I am in a room of people who are smarter than I am, I speak on the one topic that I know more about than they do, and that's myself. and so I beg your leave to share a very personal journey with you as we are talking about going home and going away. Our theme for this conference, I going away, I going home, as we would say in the Bahamas, struck a chord with me because in truth, I had to go away to find myself and come home, as Christian last night defined home so beautifully. And I want to share that voyage of discovery with you this afternoon. I was born in a colonial Bahamas to a family that prided itself on its Scottish roots. Our African roots were never mentioned, although the bush medicine, the keeping of Esu, and other African traditions were accepted components of our lifestyle. Natural hair, which my mother said looked like rain falling on hot ashes, had to pass through the hot comb to get out of the door. And of course, only the Queen's English would suffice. And so, in 1,000 little messages, the overarching message was clear. Any and everything that was not British sanctioned and anything related to our African heritage was inferior. And so as a child, in my speech, I was constantly corrected if I strayed away from standard English. It was a correcting that belittled, condemned, and made one ashamed. There was no Bahamian English. There was the Queen's English, and there was bad English. And having a father and an uncle and an aunt, we have two schools today named after two of them, who were all distinguished educators, there was no compromise. And of course, at school, the same applied. I vividly remember one day when my A-level English literature teacher, herself from Britain, overheard my Bahamian English on the corridor at break time. And by the time she was finished with her brutal reprimand, I was humiliated beyond words. And I would watch documentaries on people from other parts of the world, ordinary people, and I marveled at how they could speak their language properly at all times with no effort. How was it that my natural language was like a stepchild? I envied them, and not fully understanding my own puzzling predicament. As George Lamming noted in The Pleasures of Exile, language was indeed the tool of dominance and control. It was the fertile ground for the flourishing of the deep-rooted plant of inferiority. And yes, sometimes you have to go away to find your way home. At 18, I went to university in Canada, and there my journey home to being me began. Suddenly, I had an accent. Suddenly, I could talk to other Bahamians and nobody could understand what we were saying. My roommate couldn't understand me. When I asked Sue to please pass me a couple paper clips, she passed me two. I said, why you only pass me two? She said, because a couple is two. Not in the Bahamas, Terry. A couple is anything more than two. And when she came home, she had this part-time job at the Mills Memorial Library on campus. Every night Sue come back to the room. Sue got these hot stories about who was doing what. in fourth floor stocks. I'll never forget it. And as she started to tell me these hot stories, I'm saying, no, man. Girl, stop it, man. Don't talk it. Girl, shut your mouth. No, man, I don't believe you. Shut up, man. So she stopped talking. So I say, she left me hanging in the middle of this hot story. I say, what happened? She said, you keep telling me to stop. I say, yes, but in the Bahamas, the more I tell you to stop, the more I mean for you to talk. So we had a communication gap. She didn't know what I meant when I said somebody was throwing lowness. She didn't know when I said gully picking. She didn't know when I was diving conch. She didn't understand anything. But it caused me to realize that I had an identity. I was different. It was an awakening moment for me. Something intangible had happened. We were different. Against the background of the frigid North, our cultural differences stood out in bold relief. We had an identity, and our language was the standard bearer. So now I came back home to teach at the government high school. I was posted at GHS under the formidable Anatole Rogers, who brook no option to standard English from students or staff for that matter. She could not care who she was correcting. We were in the office one morning. Only staff was there. Rhonda Chipman Johnson had just joined the staff, and she walked in. And I said, Rhonda, you reach. And Mrs. Rogers said, Miss Nash, the verb to reach takes an object. I said, my apology, ma'am. Rhonda, you've arrived. And so that was the kind of correction that we got, even as members of staff. But now, up in the staff room, something strange was happening. Every time the Bahamian teachers started talking to each other, Alison Schilling, a foreign languages teacher from England, would hover, notepad in hand, and meticulously record everything we said. Initially, we truly thought that Alison was just being nosy. But in 1981, she, along with Dr. John Home, published the iconic Dictionary of Bahamian English. We finally understood. It was a pivotal moment. Someone had taken the time to explain to the world in academic terms that my language, the language that was natural to me, but seemingly despised by the status quo, was authentic, structured, and could be held up to academic scrutiny. It was the first time that I had seen that level of respect, actually any respect at all, paid to our own language. There it was in hardback, the language that had been denigrated and discounted. There in hardback was the explanation of why we speak as we do, the roots of our language and how it came to be, born out of our heritage and our interaction with the world. Suddenly, someone had paid us the highest respect and documented and honored our language. It was an unforgettable moment. Knowledge was power. Now I knew what to say when someone tried to correct me or ridicule the way I spoke when I used my language. Take that. And so this knowledge was in my consciousness when I became vice principal and later principal of both the preparatory and secondary departments of St. John's College. Particularly in the prep, I realized that the textbooks that came from abroad were based on the assumption that the children's first language was standard English. Yet I would venture to say that at least 90% of our students did not come to school with English as their first language. It was not what they were hearing in their homes, and certainly not on the street and in their wider society. Now, as a teacher, we are taught to take the children from where they are. But we were not doing that. And our attempts to utilize Bahamian English in the teaching of Standard English did not go far, because most of our teachers were foreigners who did not know our Bahamian English, and there was no textbook to assist. We also made deliberate attempts to acquaint our students with the fact that Bahamian English is to be respected. In addition to assemblies on the subject, we established Standard English and Bahamian English zones on campus, and we encouraged our students to practice moving seamlessly between the two. Yet I realized over time that old prejudices may retreat, but they are often lurking, please excuse me, and ready to creep upon you unawares. It was a Christmas night, and I was listening to a preacher on the radio getting ready to go to midnight mass. He was engaging in what I have heard people call asthma preaching. In between every few words, there were these deep intakes of breath. and he was talking in Bahamian English. And I was ready to tune out. It was such a turn-off. And I got this prompt, it's the only way I could describe it. And a voice said, listen to his message. And his message was, in essence, that when they go crabbing in Andros, they don't want any big bright flashlight, because they will scare the crabs away. They put a wick in a bottle because they only need to see the immediate next step. That, he said, is how God works in our lives. It was a profound message. It was delivered with an authentic Bahamian metaphor, and it was delivered in Bahamian English. It would never have been that powerful had it been delivered any other way. And I never forgot that. Listen to the message. Don't denigrate your own language. And so I realized then that there are some things that cannot be translated into Standard English. If you make me angry and I say, you are making me very angry, that is not the same as saying, gal, don't yuck up my vexation. That simply cannot be translated. And when we go out and start happy hour early, as some people in here want to do the day before Friday, when we go out and start happy hour and we have too much to drink, getting drunk is not the same as getting kapungal right up. And so there are some things that are simply untranslatable. So I arrived at the place where I had a better understanding of my language and by extension of myself. No longer would I allow my language to be put at the bottom of any hierarchical imaginings. I was buoyed by the writings of Louise Bennett, Susan Wallace, Obadiah Smith, and Telsine Turner Rowe. The songs of Pat Ramming and the stage performances of James Catlin and friends all spoke to a burgeoning pride in who we is as a people and our own validation of what belongs to us. And then came the day when Jackson Burnside said, come work for me and write our story. And I knew immediately that he was talking to our shared passion for Junkanoo. And it was an offer that I could not refuse. The Junkanoo Festival in the Bahamas started as resistance to slavery and has been documented here for over 200 years. It is in the very soul of the people of the Bahamas, and instinctively, intuitively, we respond to the beat of that drum. It is a visceral connection to our proud past. It speaks of emotions and cultural memories that we do not fully understand. It is a lifestyle for so many people like myself, and we spend all year preparing for the end of year extravaganza, although in essence the real story is getting there. We did not want to tell a dispassionate story of Junkanoo from a distance, but to get to the heart and the soul of the people who make it happen. We wanted their very conversations recorded in our book, and that is what we did. We did not sanitize it. We used the words our people use, some of which are not considered politically correct today. And we found our title when we paid attention to the young people coming into the shack to get their costumes at the start of the process. They did not say, "I come to get my costume." With great exuberance and excitement, they said, "I come to get me." And that is what we named the book. Even though there was one publisher who advised us to choose a title that would be better understood. I Come to Get Me is the true reflection of the Bahamian Junkanoo experience, told in the Junkanoo shack, told at the weekly practices, the sleepless nights, and the magnificent show-off on Bay Street. And like the Kenyan writer, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, we insisted on publishing it in our own language. And when the costumes are complete, and we come to Bay Street fully regaled for all to see, when the anonymous young men and women that we barely glance at all year put on their finery, and the whole country stands in awe, then we say, "Dis me na." And so, I look forward to the day when we fully embrace our language, when we standardize the spelling, when we write the textbooks, and, to paraphrase Shanti Seymour, one of our own from St. John's, when Bahamian Creole is no longer broken, but whole. Thanks, man.